appointed Kaylee Devon to the board, but she may have just learned about the appointment today, and so I suspect she may not be here, at least I don't see her. Anyway, so we have a new board member. I understand, but don't know any details, that the city manager at the end of the year may also make some more appointments. But that's where we are right now. So we've lost Stephanie, and I sent her our best wishes and thanked her for her service, but she had other commitments that made it just too hard to continue to serve. So that's where we are on membership. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for August 26. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? I have one item I noted at the tail end of the minutes. There's an identification of recommendations, and it's identified for August of 2021, the recommendation made for breakdown of legal expenses pertaining to law enforcement personnel. We actually did not make that recommendation. We held the item for further consideration, so that specific entry needs to be removed from the minutes because we didn't make the recommendation at that time. Are there any other additions or corrections? Is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approved as corrected. Okay, the next item is on the public agenda. I looked and no one has signed up. Does anybody wish to speak during the public agenda portion? No? Okay, staff report?
Hey, good afternoon. The closed entries for August 1st through August 31st, we had 25 external complaints, and we had 11 internal. We also, as you know, we break it down by bureaus now. We have 13 complaints coming from Patrol South, 8 from Patrol North, 7 from East, 5 from Patrol West, and then 4 from investigations, 2 from the Central Bureau, and 1 from Administrative Services. We also have it broke down as far as we have a total of 41 employees that are being investigated, and we have a total of 847 employees working for the police department right now. And as you can see on the breakdown, the most common complaints that we've had during that time period, 10 rude conduct complaints, 10 comply with policy, 9 complete and thorough investigation, and then 5 tentative complaints by citizens.
Any questions? Captain, I was looking at the closed complaint listing for August 1 through the 31st. And I would like to pull for review case number 21 PSB 1527, which is
Use of force.
use of force and reporting of use of force allegations, and 21 PSB 3133, which is a citizen's report of excessive force used during an arrest. So I'd like to pull those 2 cases for review.
Okay.
Anyone else have a case they'd like to be considered for review? And as you look at these forms over, if you decide you have some, just let Captain Nicholson or me know. The next item on the agenda is Dr. Berzer, citation analysis update. Come on up, sir.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here and present to you some findings from our latest citation analysis. I'd like to introduce my research assistant. He's a PhD candidate in the School of Psychology at Wichita State, Thomas Skinner, so he assisted on this project. What I thought I would do is there's about 6 different areas throughout the report that I'll go through and kind of give you some snapshots of what that data looks like, and then maybe leave it open for some questions at the end. And I understand that you've been furnished a copy of the report. So as you know, our goal is we signed a service contract with the police department to do an independent analysis of their citation data for 2019, 2020. So that was the scope of the project. We were interested in pulling out the racial characteristics of those citations. We were looking at that by gender, and also the most common citations that were issued by Wichita police officers. And then we looked at citations given at a scene of an accident by race. And finally, we employed some statistical massaging of the data, primarily using descriptive statistics, an approach that we call a relative risk index statistic, which is a standardized measurement of a comparison group, so to speak, against an at-risk group. The at-risk group we compared would be minority citizens, particularly African-American citizens, and you'll see why that is in just a moment. And the group for comparison would be, of course, Caucasian citizens. So I'm going to move ahead to page number 4 and bring your attention to figures 1 and 2 in the technical report. So as you see here in figure 1, we break this down by 2019, 2020. As you can see, the totals there for each year, the total citations that were issued. So if you look at 2020, slightly less citations issued in 2020 than 2019. That actually represents about 5% less. And then as you go to the right of your page, the percentage, you can see the number of, or the racial characteristics of that. So for example, of the total citations issued, 58.5% were issued to Caucasian citizens. Black citizens were issued 21% of those citations, and Hispanic 16.5%, if you can follow me there. If you go to figure 2, we pulled out gender, and as you can see, males received more citations than females. That is pretty in line with most of the national data when we do this type of work. On the next page, page 5, this is where we put all the data together. So we collapse 2019 and 2020, and to see what that would look like. And as you can see here on figure 3, there were a total, of course, over the 2 years of 95,728 citations issued to citizens. Of those, for the 2 years, 58.5% were issued to white citizens, 21% to black citizens, and 16.5% to Hispanic citizens. Now, if you'll notice the column that reads percentage of population, what we're basing that on is the latest United States Census data for this area. And I would like to at least offer a caveat. Those of us that do policing research, particularly this type of research, don't necessarily like to use census data a whole lot because it does have some validity issues. It's just a simple estimate to give us some idea of what this might look like. And if you look at a complex issue like racial profiling, it would be better to have, how many persons, the entire persons that were citizens that were stopped by the police, and maybe those that didn't get tickets. That might be more revealing than simply the census data. Census data is an inaccurate estimate of actually the driving population. So keep that in mind. It gives us a general indication, but we can only do limited amounts of analysis with that. Then, as you notice in figure 4, we sorted that by accident as well. So as you can see here, there were a total of 33,037 accidents that police officers investigated. And you can see the racial demographics of the citations that were issued at an automobile accident. So White citizens were in 61.4% of the accidents, and their percent of the population, of course, is 74.3. Black citizens were involved in 13.2% of the total accidents, and their population, according to the census, is 10.9%. And Hispanics were involved in 12.8% of the accidents, and of course, their population, according to the census, is 17.2%. So that gives you a little bit of an eye for the actual traffic accidents. Now on the next page, page 6, this is where we get in, start diving into the data a little bit more. See where it says unique citations. What we do here is we were interested in eliminating all stops that where a driver received multiple citations. So we were just interested here in collecting or capturing stops where just one citation was issued. And we did that for a number of reasons. The first reason being that oftentimes there might have been others in the vehicle that received a citation as well. So that would kind of skew the results if we're just primarily looking at the driver, okay? So you follow me? Okay, so we broke that out, and what we found was 71,872 were unique citations, or about 75% of the tickets issued by a Wichita police officer for those 2 years involved issuing only one citation. In 25% of the stops, there were multiple citations issued. And so we also break that down by racial demographics, as you can see here. It changes just a little bit of the numbers. Caucasians, 63.4% when you break it out by unique citations. Black Americans or black citizens, 17.5%, and Hispanics at 14.6%. So a little bit of variation there compared before we took out or separated those citations out. And then on page 7, I won't say much about that. As you can see, this remained relatively steady across the quarters that we looked at for the 2 years. As you can see, there was a dip in quarter 2 in 2020. Maybe some explanation, maybe COVID had something to do with that dip, and some slight increases in certain quarters. But for the most part, this remained pretty steady over the 2 years. Then we were interested on page 8 in capturing the most common citations written by a police officer to a citizen or issued by a police officer. So what we did here is we only looked at citations that were issued at least 100 times. Everything else we kept out because for analysis purposes it wouldn't really make sense with those statistics being so low. So what this captures here are 58 of the most common citations issued by Wichita police officers for those 2 years. And as you look at the top, you'll see speeding was by far the most common citation that was issued. In fact, over almost 32,000 speeding tickets were issued. So you can kind of get a feel of what types of citations were issued, or the more common types. Now, I tell you, one of the things as a researcher involved in this type of work that we like to look at are violations that citizens themselves, that we have found through research, that citizens themselves think that the police stopped them for these reasons because of their race, but they're using it as a guise or a pretext to stop them. So on the next page, on page 10, we break this out by the relative risk index. Okay, remember, the relative risk index, we're looking at the risk of African Americans in this population of citations, the risk of them getting a ticket compared to our comparison group, which was white citizens. So on that column that says black RRI, anything over 1 on that RRI score, that basically means that there's some differences. So the first one, as you'll note, child restraint under 4 years, and the relative risk index statistic is 12.4. That means African Americans were 12 times as likely to receive that ticket when compared to white citizens. The same for child restraint 4 to 7 years old. African Americans were 9.1 chances more likely of receiving that. And you can go down the list and you can see those relative risk for African Americans. But I do want to highlight a couple of different citations that we know through research in Wichita and across the state of Kansas, that these are the types of violations that racial minority citizens tell us are the types that police are using to stop them as a guise, but it's really because they're being profiled. And go down to tag illuminated. African Americans are 4.2 times as likely to receive that ticket. Signaling 100 feet before a turn is another one that we commonly hear in research when we talk to citizens and crunch those numbers. Defective tail light is another one. Windshield cracks. So all of those, as you can see, the risk for African Americans receiving those were anywhere from 4 times as likely to 3 times as likely. And in fact, in about 41 of the 58 common citations that we looked at, African American citizens were more likely to receive those when compared with white citizens. So that just kind of gives you a look here. Now, can we say that this is because of discriminatory policing, biased policing? We can't really go that far with this. What we need to do, we would have to go a little bit further in our analysis, and that would mean to use some different benchmarking techniques. Keep in mind that our benchmark techniques were using U.S. Census data. What many of us do that do this work is we like to create our own benchmarks at times. So in other words, we go out into the field, into different areas of interest, and we train research teams to literally make observations of the traffic in and out of those areas and create our own benchmark, which is a little more statistically robust over time. Another thing we do, and we recommend this often to police agencies, is to do internal benchmarkings. And that would be situating or comparing like situated officers on their stops that they're making on their beats. And there's some pretty sophisticated tools and statistics that we can use to flesh that out as well. But that increasingly is becoming a gold standard to look at internal benchmarkings within the agency. So, the overarching conclusions, there are some areas here that I think that, need to be looked at just because of the fact that many of our citizens feel that's how they're being stopped as a guise with some of what they consider to be miscellaneous violations. And so, there are areas, yes, that need to be looked at. In addition, can we say racial profiling is occurring based on this? We can't go that far based on what we have at this point. So, and with that, I'm going to let Thomas cover anything that I might have not covered here. Anything you can think of we missed?
My new wife would say that the less talking I do, the better. But I think you about covered it. I just want to highlight again that RRI, that relative risk index, is going to be one of the best indicators that we have when it comes to making sure that we're trying to treat everybody as equitably as possible. And so sometimes, like Dr. Berzer said, using census data can be inaccurate because even though we have the idea of how many people are in the population, census data is not always accurate. There is historic underreporting from a lot of racial and ethnic groups, and it doesn't always estimate the driving population, only the citizen population. So that is very important to keep in mind. But that relative risk index, that's something that comes from public health, I believe, a measure that has been used a lot during the past couple of years with our own public health pandemic. And so that's something I think that highlights the best, but it's open a lot into interpretation because all we can do is give the relative risk index on that 10th page, I believe. We can give that relative risk index, but we don't know based on this data alone, what's due to individuals, what's due to systems, what's due to circumstances. And so that's something that is outside of the scope of the data that we got. But I know that, internal benchmarking is something that's been done in some police departments, and I think is, we would say is a recommendation that we have that the WPD maybe finds a way of collecting additional data that we can use and maybe make a few more conclusions based on that.
Yes, Paul?
I just want to make sure that I understand. So the information on pages 8 and 10 represent unique citations.
Yes, I believe so.
That's correct?
So 10 is not.
So what was that?
So 10 is all citations.
10 is all citations.
Because we have to, we are looking at it by citation.
Okay. And so then 8 is the unique,
Yep.
so,
8 and 10 are both all citations.
so then the assumption is, or do we actually know so then if it's a unique citation, that is the purpose the person was pulled over or, right?
So
Or they could be pulled over for something else and given the citation. How does that work?
Oftentimes, that's going to be the primary violation is what they've been stopped for. So if there were secondary violations, to give you an example, they're stopped for speed over the speed limit. And that's just an example. And then there's some secondary things the officer may find no proof of insurance, or maybe the driver's license is suspended then, or maybe the passenger is issued some ticket for some reason. So, we have to be real careful when we look at that total number. That's why we like to do it a couple of different ways, pull out unique citations and then compare back to, the total amount of citations.
So then the unique citations is just the driver.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the way that works, unless we're dealing with like a pedestrian
Right.
or a bicyclist, that kind
Yes,
of a thing.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Was there any attempt, we think we talked, we mentioned this last time you were here, about trying to do a geographic analysis within the city or by patrol bureau or whatever? Was any attempt made out of that way?
Yeah, we made that recommendation. We didn't hear back. I can tell you this, though, that I know the chief and Deputy Chief Givens really were interested in this, particularly because we looked and discussed the idea of the child seat. That was a big one here. We're looking at 12 as times likely for African Americans to get a ticket for child restraint under 4. What they did is went into and applied for a grant to get money. It's a child seat program and voucher program in essence. And that program, I did just finished the evaluation for that, and it was very promising. And one of the things we found is that it significantly increased citizens' their opinion of the police. And we tried to get some measure of that early in the survey, but after, during when they're at the when they're at the service auto dealer getting their equipment fixed, we have them complete a survey before they leave, or the auto folks did. And so we're capturing this data that way, but it seemed to be very effective because we asked them to rate the police prior to that and then rate it after that experience, and it was significant. So I know that they did look at some of this and tried to, make things a great deal better.
Well, one of the reasons I asked that is because when you're trying to, obviously we have different racial proportions in different areas.
Yeah.
And if we have a heavier policing presence in an area that's got more African Americans, then you'll have a higher statistic.
Right.
So one of the things that'd be interesting to know is if you have an area where the African American minority community is much smaller, how does those stops compare in that area in terms of disproportionality? I take it that kind of analysis wasn't done.
Yeah, not this time around. So we did this 2 years ago, and we looked at it just by zip code, which is pretty limited as well. If we did it by beat, you could look in and hone in at areas more specifically. We did look at zip code 2 years ago, and you're absolutely right. Obviously, places where more Black Americans live, and we do have census data, that breaks down by zip code. Obviously, the rate of stops of Black citizens is higher in zip codes where higher percentage of Hispanics live, higher rate of Hispanics. So about what you would expect, but you have to remember too that the most of these are all driving, or a large amount of them, and so people are driving from place to place. So just because somebody's in that zip code doesn't mean they're stopped in that zip code.
Other questions? Yes, we have questions from the community. Go ahead.
So who selected the areas of analysis, right? Because there's the accident analysis and then just the citation analysis. So who selected those? And then did you give the police department like a menu? Like, these are all the ways we can break
Yeah, that's the data that we were furnished by the police department, and apparently they had done some internal analysis of the data, and we didn't have access to that. They wanted a kind of a independent body to look at it, so we got just what we got from the police department, and that was it.
When did they get that to you?
Oh, man, it was back just in midsummer, July, something like that. We turned this report around because I knew it needed to be a timely report to get out, so we turned it around pretty fast.
Yes, ma'am.
On the RRI, you said it was based on the feelings that African Americans had, and it was consistent. So were the feelings consistent enough for you to make a determination?
Okay, the RRI, so that's a standardized rate of comparison against the control group, white citizens, and we're using black citizens as our at-risk population, so we're doing comparisons there. Where do we get those comparisons from? U.S. Census data. And so that gives us some idea, just based on this citation data, how many more times likely it is that black citizens received a specific citation. That makes sense.
So this is real data, not just a perception.
Yeah, absolutely. This is real data, yes.
Okay, I have a question. You said, excuse me, I got bronchitis. Do your citations, tickets, child restraint, do you also keep, do your data? How many of, if you don't have it on there, how many of these tickets are issued through citizens calling and telling them something, and they do traffic stops?
We don't have that. We didn't have that data. We don't have that information available.
You didn't have that? Okay.
No.
And then too, I have another question. Okay, through, you said through regs. Okay. How many citations, I use it as an example. I had a reg back here in April and stuff. And through my reg, I was issued a citation. The first citation they gave to me was due to these two Caucasian ladies telling the police something. So they issued me the citation. But the citation that they gave me, it was in my maiden name, but it was the wrong social security number on the citation. So when I gave it back to the officer and stuff like that, Officer O'Brien and stuff, and when I told him that wasn't my social security number, I was issued another ticket and stuff. So do y'all get data on mistakes like that?
No, we don't have that information when we receive it from the police department.
So how can you say that blacks is not more likely to be stopped in location?
Well, we're just simply going on the citation data that we have, yes. Yeah, 95,000 citations.
Okay.
Dr. Berger, you were here, I'm going to say 2 years ago,
About that.
and I don't have the prior report, but how does this data compare to the prior workup you did?
Fairly similar. Some of those three initial relative risk index scores were the same then, for the same violations. They actually went down a little bit this time, and we were trying to think, well, did the car voucher, the child seat voucher program help a great deal? And we really can't go to that, to make the cause that being. So. But it's
I think
pretty
the
much.
number of citations is down, though, isn't it?
I think they were down slightly. Yes.
You had a question?
Senator.
Thank you, Chairman Fowler, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Beiser, and thank you guys for what you're doing on the Citizens Review Board. I have a comment and a question. So my comment is, I think this is the first time I've attended a meeting, and I remember back in 2018 when it was established. However, I think this information, and I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if there's a way that the citizens kind of, whether it's on Channel 7, a public service announcement, but somehow the public, that's what I hear from people, think that they're not being heard because they don't know what you guys are doing. They don't know that their issues are being addressed. So if we can somehow get the information out there, I don't know how you do it, but more public, or people just need to know that they've been heard and you're addressing it. So more publication or more, I don't know, I watch Channel 7 a lot, or Channel 8, but let people know that you're addressing this issue would be my ask.
I can tell you that you notice there's a camera over here, and we're being streamed live, and that it is available to go after the fact and look at the video of the meeting. And I can also tell you that recently, of course, we've always published our minutes, but recently we made a decision and have asked that the materials that are provided be included either in the agenda or the minutes packet. So, for example, Dr. Berzer's report would be posted as well. So we're trying to meet that need.
Okay, very good. And then my question, so you've been hired to do this study, and over the years, I've listened to presentations from you as a lawmaker in Topeka on these studies. So after you've been hired to do this one, and then what? What's the purpose? What the information, or maybe the chairman can answer after he does this, then what will you do with it to make a difference?
I can tell you the perspective when I have a conversation with the chief of police and Deputy Chief Wanda Gibbons is they want to use as much as they can of this to impact fundamental policy if there's something there that they need to change. And I think an example of the child restraint device going into that grant program, I think that was a start. So I think it gives them an avenue to really look at the data and see where are those big disparities at in the data, and why is that? And so I think that becomes the crux of the overarching issue, I should say.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment. Without the data by beat or by officer, I feel like the Wichita Police Department isn't really being that transparent. Right? Obviously, there are some disparities here, and I just feel like this is incomplete. All we do is you're the one doing what you were contracted to do. So, what next? I mean, how do we get the real critical stuff that says this guy or gal might be a problem, this area, whatever it is. I mean, I get the policy part, but there's still real lives impacted by these.
Sure. I think what we advise other law enforcement agencies when we do this work is that, you think seriously about internal benchmarking, or you think seriously about allowing, researchers to develop benchmarks within an area that we think we're having disparities. And I think we can come up with better answers when we have more accurate benchmarks, and when we're able to go in and compare like situated officers on their stop practices.
How would you do that? How would you develop a more accurate benchmark?
One of them is what we call field observation. So it involves a research team. They're trained. We look at the areas of interest, and we send trained observers into the field at different times, randomized times throughout the day. And they simply watch traffic patterns at a certain, for example, intersection, and they record that. They record what they perceive to be the race of the driver, black, white, Hispanic, etc. So we capture that randomly over the course of the day, and we never do it past a certain hour because there's a concept called the veil of darkness, and it becomes more difficult to see inside of the vehicle. And then we do that for several weeks, and we develop our benchmark of who is actually traveling in and out of that area, because we know that oftentimes some of these areas citizens are simply traveling through, they don't live there, and so we think that gets to the heart of a better benchmark.
I think when you were last year, and maybe it was a follow-up discussion you might have had with the chief, I can't remember now, it's been several years ago, we talked about doing it either by beat or by bureau, and also trying to understand the officer's assignment. Because obviously a traffic officer is going to be a lot more involved in pulling people over traffic violations than patrol officer or somebody who has some other assignment. Have you been involved in any discussions of doing an analysis in that way?
No.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me get yours.
The next item on the agenda is a hiring process presentation.
And next up is Sergeant Vogel from the Training Bureau. He'll be talking about the department's recruiting and hiring processes.
Oh, you got me all set up. Thanks, Keely. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sergeant Bogle, and I always like to start off when it comes to recruiting. Everybody in this room, I'm always taking and looking for new recruiters, okay? Because every single one of you in this room is a potential recruiter and should be a recruiter. Why? Because you get to have your little bit of say in the potential new police officer for the department who will in turn give back and serve all of us in the room in the community, right? So we're very good about trying to utilize citizens and even individuals on the department. We tell department members all the time that we are our own best recruiters as well. Everybody is, because it is a very big joint team effort. We're very good about trying to reach out to local organizations, such as the NAACP. We've recently partnered with the NAAAP, which is the National Asian American Association of Professionals, which is tied into the WAA, which is the Wichita Asian Association. So we're pretty proud of that. So we're working hand in hand with that. We've developed that partnership this week. We've been very good over the last couple of years since I've been in this position about trying to build bonds and relationships with other colleges in the area and outside of our area too, because as we know that on this police department, we don't have just people from the Wichita area. It's nice to say that we're born and raised in Wichita, but we know that being an Air Force city, we get a lot of transplants via McConnell, so we have people that come from all over the country. So we try to build relationships, and it's interesting, just a couple examples of some colleges that we've reached out to. Just recently, last week, was at Cloud County Community College in Concordia, and we had developed that partnership last year, and they were so thankful and excited that we had reached out because they have a criminal justice program there, and WPD had never really been involved in the past, and they were so ecstatic to have the largest police agency in the state come and talk to their students, and those could be potential future WPD police officers someday. And the thing is just because it's northern Kansas up near the Nebraska border doesn't mean that a lot of those students aren't from the Wichita area, right? They have family and friends here too. So we're very big about trying to reach out to our community in a big way. And we know, and the reason why we do that is because of the fact that when we reach out to community members and even just ourselves on the police department, we're having interactions with new people each and every day. So we think, you might think, Mr. Kitchen might think, you know what, I go to my local restaurant, or I go to the local convenience store, and I always have this interaction with this particular employee, and they've got really great customer service. They're just very friendly. They have a great personality. Boy, maybe they deal with the public all the time. Why not say something, right? Put in a word, and then that's how the dialogue starts. And then you pass along my name, and then that's just how it gets going. A lot of times when I run into people who work in the customer service industry, because that's what we do in the police department, that's what we're doing is customer service, right? We're providing a service to the community. So a lot of times I'm like, wow, really the only difference between you and I is you're wearing that uniform and I'm wearing this uniform and I have a badge and a gun. That's really the only difference. So why not come over on this side and serve a bigger purpose? So we're very active as a department as a whole on trying to recruit. Over the last several academy classes that we've had, we've broken records. The last academy class that we had was the first ever female majority recruit class in WPD history. And as much research as we have done, sounds like we're the first in the nation to have a first ever female majority recruit class. So that's definitely something to be proud of. And the class before that, we had a class of 54 that we started with, and that was an all-time record. That was the largest recruit class we'd ever had for the Wichita Police Department, and there was a record within that record. That was the first time ever that we had the majority of the recruit class, it was minority. So that was the first ever recruit class that we had where the minorities were the majority of the recruit class. So we're very proud of that because we're really truly trying to reflect the community that we serve. And since I'm serving in that role, being in charge of that, I really take pride in that to make sure that we're trying to accomplish what we're doing. So when it comes to the actual hiring process, and this ties into the, let me use the mouse here, this ties into the recruiting efforts, WPDjobs.com, this is where everybody can come to apply, and we have multiple videos on here and photos to highlight the diversity that we have on the department. And our biggest thing is with the message that we're trying to relay to citizens in the community that we're serving, and also to potential people who might want to be a potential new police recruit, is that, look, you know what? It doesn't matter what your background is. Look at this. You look like me. Hey, you sound like me. You talk like me. Maybe we have some of the same hobbies and interests. And I also tell people, too, never say never, because you just never know what life's going to bring you. I always use myself as an example. I have a meteorology degree. I was a TV meteorologist on air at Channel 12 for 6 years. I thought policing was interesting, but if you told me way back when that I was going to be a cop someday, I'd be like, yeah, you're crazy. And I've been a cop for 18 years. I've been with the WPD for 16. So that's what I always tell people, never say never. So I always like to use myself as an example. And I always tell people that the thing is you know, one of the big purposes in life is to be able to give back and help other people. And it's a gratifying feeling. I tell people, we're not going to get rich, and we're not going to be millionaires, but that's, you can't put a price on helping somebody, no matter how big or how small the event may be, right? So what we'll do is, when the applicant wants to apply with the department, they'll come to the WPDjobs.com website, and this is our application process. They will click on this red box here to create their online account, which is tied into Human Resources here at City Hall, and it's tied into governmentjobs.com through NeoGov. So they'll create their online account, and they'll also submit their online application in a one-step process on that. Once Human Resources has gotten the application and they verify that the information is good, there's no issues with that, they get referred over to me, and they get scheduled for the written aptitude test. And we do that off-site. We used to do it here at City Hall, but of course COVID changed that. So currently we're doing it, we're partnering with Risen Savior Lutheran Church over by K96 in Woodlawn. That's where we're currently doing our written aptitude test every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. So once the applicants take the written test, which I administer, they get 25 minutes to study a booklet, and all the answers for the questions will come from the study booklet, which they have 25 minutes to study from. I give them a couple-minute bathroom break, and I always suggest that you might want to try to go to the restroom, because once we start the test, you'll have to decide if you have to go to the bathroom, if you want to hold it and fail, or if you want to go to the bathroom or hold it and pass, or if you need to go to the bathroom, or if you'll have to quit, because you have to be able to take the test. We want to make sure that nobody cheats. So once they pass the written aptitude test, they get assigned to one of the pre-employment detectives that works in the pre-employment section. And at that point, the applicant is emailed a questionnaire. It's a 54-page questionnaire. We tell people it asks anything and everything. We tell everybody there are no perfect people in this world, and all we're asking for is just truthful honestness, right? Excuse me. So we tell people, just let it all out, because after all, we're the cops, so we're going to find out, right? The detectives, they detect, they're fact finders, they're going to find out. So once the applicant fills out their, electronically, once they fill out their 54-page questionnaire, they will email that back to the pre-employment detective, and then at that point, the pre-employment detective will go ahead and do their initial background investigation on them to make sure that there's no warrants, nothing like that, no suspended driver's licenses. Once that's completed, they will then contact the applicant to get them scheduled for their physical agility test. That combines, it's a combination of 4 tests, and we have it, let's see here, we have it online. Let's see. Give me 1 second here. Oh, here we go, physical fitness test. So we have a video up here, so the applicants know ahead of time. They can watch this 4-minute video, which will describe how to do the test. It's all based on gender and age, and it's 4 tests. The first test is maximum amount of push-ups in 1 minute, maximum amount of sit-ups in 1 minute. Then we have what's called the Illinois agility test. It simulates a foot chase. We have 2 marked lines on the gym floor. They're running most of the distance of the gym, and it's 3 invisible lines. They will start in a prone push-up position. We'll tell them to begin. They will sprint to 1 line, touch it, come back. They will weave through 4 cones, weave through 4 more cones, and they will sprint to the line and sprint back. And then the last test is the beep test or the pacer test. Once they complete all 4 tests, they get scored, and they have to have a minimum combined score of 20 points or greater out of any combination of 4 tests in order to pass to the next step. And we'll go back here to the steps. So once they're done with that, the detective, this is when the applicant will start a series of interviews during the hiring process. The detective will have what's called a first contact interview with the applicant. That's where the applicant and their assigned pre-employment detective will sit down one-on-one, and that 54-page questionnaire where we said, hey, let's let it all out and be truthful, the pre-employment detective and the applicant will go over that questionnaire line by line, because we're trying to make sure there's no discrepancies between that and their online application. And that usually on average takes about 2 to 3 hours, so it's a very thorough interview. If the applicant passes that, they will be subjected to an oral board interview, of course, where we have a panel of board members. The applicant will come in. They are asked 10 standardized questions, and there's no follow-up. So whatever answers are given, that's what we take. Once the applicant is done, we usually have a pre-employment detective that will run that program. Usually we'll have a maximum of up to 7 applicants at one given time, because they're allowed roughly 30 minutes apiece. So like this morning we had 5. That took us up almost till noon. And after each applicant is done, the detective will go ahead and tabulate all the scores from the board members, and they have to have a minimum score of 44 or greater to pass. If they pass that, the detective at that point will get them scheduled for their polygraph examination. We've teamed up with an examiner currently out of the city in Emporia, and we have partnered again with the Risen Savior Lutheran Church, so we conduct our polygraph examinations at the church. When we get enough applicants scheduled to have the individual or examiner come drive down from Emporia. Once the examination is done, the examiner will generate a report, and will send it to myself and pre-employment detectives, and that'll be reviewed to make sure there's no issues or no follow-up that needs to be needed. If there's no issues with that, social media checks are done at that point, and all the reference checks are sent out. So when everything comes back and the detectives see no issues, they compile a summary, an overall summary of the applicant, and then it gets reviewed through the chain of command. And if the applicant is approved, then the detective will go ahead and get them scheduled for their technically official interviews with the chief and the command staff interview. And those are 2 different interviews, but on the same day. If they pass those, then I end up giving them a conditional job offer. And at that point, all they have left to do is their medical physical, which the drug screening is tied into with that, and then their psychological exam. And we utilize individuals here in the city for both of those. And roughly about maximum of 2 weeks from the day of the conditional job offer, offer, the applicant at that point will know whether they've passed both of those, and if they've passed both of those, then they're pretty much official for a seat in the next academy class at that point. And once we get all the applicants staffed for the next recruit class, then the academy at that portion goes for 24 weeks. On average, it takes about 3 to 4 months to go through the hiring process, but as you can see, since I've told you what the hiring process is like, there's a lot of variables to where some individuals can go faster or some individuals can go slower. It could be, information regarding reference material coming back. Maybe there's scheduling conflicts. So there's a multitude of variables that can make it shorter or longer. But on average, it's 3 to 4 months. And we're very big on our department too. With individuals, we get a lot of individuals that apply from out of state. So we try to accommodate them and try to minimize how many times they come back and forth to Wichita, because if we feel this is a viable candidate, we want to make sure that it's going to be a valued interest for us to help accommodate them if we're going to eventually hire this individual. So we try to bulk the process as much as we can. We tell the applicant, for example, if they're coming from California, if you can give us 3 days and spend 2 nights here, we can get the majority of this done. So really, you only need to come back 2 times. And that's been a big plus for us. But overall, that's how our recruiting effort is laid out and our pre-employment and process. Yep.
How many applicants do you have for positions offered?
Keep it a little bit more specific because...
Sure, do you get 2 applicants for every position, or do you just not have enough applicants? The question is, what is the job demand out there? How many people want the job versus how many jobs you have available?
Well, I can say this: we've been fairly steady. Just in the time that I've been up there for about 2.5 years, so we're fairly steady when it comes to the number of applications coming in. Overall, as we know, with COVID, that kind of changed the dynamics a little bit. So a lot of the going out to career fairs and job fairs, we had to kind of think outside of the box. We had to rely more on social media and do more advertising via social media, or maybe having interactions that we would have had one-on-one with someone who might have come to the training center to want to speak in the office to get more information. We've had to do Skype or Teams or something along those lines. But as far as actual people wanting to come and apply for our department, I can't speak for any other department, of course, but we're not having any issues. And I like to credit a lot of that to our recruiting team that we have, and citizens like yourselves reaching out to us saying, hey, I know so-and-so down the street. I think they'd make a great, give us their information. We'll contact them. We'll set up the rest. Just give us a phone number and a name and we're good. Yes.
So of the 7 steps, is there a specific step, like a tipping point where like a majority of candidates that aren't going to make it, are they, is it like step 1, do they just say, oh, a lot of people drop off step 1, or does that happen like at step 4? Where do you generally lose a lot of applicants that just aren't going to make it?
Well, that's kind of a hard question to ask because it just kind of depends as we're going through. This is like a train that never stops. So you're getting different passengers on at different times. So you might get a bulk of applicants where they may kind of struggle with the physical agility testing. So they don't pass that, and if they don't pass it, they temporarily get disqualified for a year. Or it might be we might get an influx where we didn't have any issues with that, and with the oral board interview, maybe we had kind of a batch of applicants that came through that just they're nervous about speaking in front of a large group of people, or they didn't come very prepared. There's a multitude of reasons.
What is the psychological evaluation? What's the nature of that evaluation?
And just to make sure that you're in a clear and right mind as of today. How are you today?
How do you do that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you want to subject yourself to that or not, but basically what happens is the psychological doctor has 2 time slots. We have morning sessions and afternoon sessions. And the applicant, if they make it to that point, they will have to go to the psychologist's office and fill out a booklet, a whole bunch of questions, and that's what the doctor will end up testing them over.
Be like an MMPI or one?
Yes, the IPI-2, yes, yep. Yes.
So when we get into the academy, what's the percentage of folks who complete the training at the academy?
Without saying a specific exact number, I could say roughly 90 to 95% on average pass and complete the whole 24 weeks. And that few percentage where they don't make it, it could be a whole multitude of different reasons too.
And what's the age range that you accept for applicants?
We're one of the agencies in the country where we don't have a cap on the age limit. For example, there are some departments in the country where the age limit will be like 45 roughly. So like the feds is like 37. So we don't have a cap when it comes to ages.
So even a 62-year-old could apply?
Yep, they could. Yep, they could.
I guess you can't discriminate on age, so you-
Nope. That'd be up to them whether they can pass the steps or not.
How many push-ups can they do? I guess they get paid when they're in the academy.
Yes, yep.
What is the starting pay?
Currently $23.18.
An hour?
Yes.
Sergeant Vogel, you mentioned that they take the test at the church. Why is it an off-site or not at the training center?
Well, originally, pre-COVID, before City Hall got shut down, all the testing was done in human resources. But then at that point, when we had the building closed, each department, you were in charge of doing your own thing. And we were utilizing the training center for a little bit, but the problem is when you have 2 large agencies, there's a lot of scheduling conflicts, and I have no issue working with community members. And to me, I just think it's a great thing anyway to go ahead and work hand in hand. And the individuals who are part of that church, they get to see potential new police officers that may be serving them someday. So to me, I think it's a win-win situation. It's not a big issue.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Jeremy, on a rough percentage, how much of your time do you spend working with recruiting versus actual doing training recruits?
I couldn't give you an exact percentage because I've never sat down and never thought about that, but
Ballpark figure?
I couldn't even give you a ballpark figure.
But you do both, correct?
Yes, yep.
Okay. I dropped you an email a couple days ago asking about some recruiting questions.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to just kind of bounce through those. If you don't have time to respond to all of them, if you think of these, we can take that offline for later, but I at least want to read them into the record. In the past, I've witnessed a few officers' actions in the field that are inconsistent with our laws, and I feel it's only fair before I bring that up to anybody in PSB. I want to know if they're being trained that way, and if they're seeking for training, then I really should be bringing something to PSB on that. So number one, are officers trained to always use the standard greeting we learned about 2 months ago from the department's policy manual when they're detaining a pedestrian? And that's where it says, I stopped you because, hi, I'm so-and-so with WPD, I stopped you because of this. Are they supposed to do that with pedestrians as well?
Well, I'll tell you, to answer your question, that's out of the section that I oversee, so I'm not going to answer that question at this time.
Mr. Hancock, I can talk to you about that.
Okay. And like I said, I can buzz through these kind of quick, and if we need to differ on any of them, that's fine. When detaining a pedestrian suspects, officers, according to state law, may demand their name, address, and purpose. Have they also been trained to demand a person's driver's license, date of birth, and social security number when they're stopping a pedestrian?
Well, I think I'll kind of go piggyback here on the captain over here.
Refer to the captain on that, that's fine.
Yeah.
When conducting a field interview of a witness, how are officers trained to handle an uncooperative witness that invokes either their 5th or the 14th Amendment right not to execute the officer?
Yeah, I'll do the same thing. I'll piggyback on that too.
That's fine. Department regulations require officers to tell the citizen his or her first name, and last name and ID number upon request. Have they ever been trained to say, "Not now," point to their nameplate and say, "Right there," or that providing their first name is optional?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that as well.
Fair enough. According to their training, when may officers legally drive with extinguished headlights after dark?
I'll piggyback and refer to the captain.
Fair enough.
All right?
Are officers trained to detain media videographers who are not physically interfering with law enforcement?
Yeah.
Are officers trained to demand press credentials from videographers who identify themselves as independent journalists?
I'll defer that at this time.
And last, are officers trained to order videographers, "You can record me all you want, but you must back up 20 feet or some other specified distance"?
I'll refer that too. Thanks, sir.
Thank you for your time, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, comments? Thank
I
you.
just want to make sure I understand correctly. The process you've described is strictly for sworn or commissioned positions?
Yes, sir.
WPD?
Yeah, commission
HR
officer.
handles other department recruitment and hiring?
Yes, yeah. I'm just, we're specifically geared for the recruiting in this pre-employment section is to have commission officers that will eventually go out and serve in a patrol officer rank. Yes. Yes, sir.
Pass or fail, it's just pass or fail, unlike, like in the school, you got A, B, C, D, and percentages, it's just simply pass and fail, because we know from school, you can pass with 60%.
So which portion of the process are you talking about on the pass fail?
Once they complete everything and they go through what you say, it's 24 weeks to complete the whole,
Are you talking about the class?
yeah, the class.
Oh, yeah. They have multiple tests throughout the class because they have to be able to meet state standards and state curriculum. I can at least tell you that. Because that's outside of my section, but I can't tell you that.
All I know is percentages. I know some people are better than others. That's all I know. Numbers and percentages. And I know some people barely pass. And some people pass real well. So I just was curious.
Yeah, it's not a grade system. It's percentages. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You know what they call the guy that is the bottom of his med class?
Doctor.
Doctor. Well, there you go.
A doctor.
Let's keep going. Sergeant Vogel, I had one.
All right.
I'm sorry, I had one last question.
Let's go on to the next item on the
Jake, I'm sorry, I had one more. Yeah, on the oral interview board, I think I participated. I got to participate in that one.
Yeah, you've been on with me.
Is there always a community member that's involved?
Yeah, we always have a citizen. Sure do.
Right, it wasn't just special for me or anything.
Oh, you were special that day. You were my citizen that day.
I appreciated that. I just wanted to, I thought, well,
don't worry, I'll have you back.
What struck me about that is just the kind of the racial diversity of that group. I thought we just looked at candidates completely different. Like the candidates other people liked were different, and so I found that intriguing. I think then you came in, and I think you had a good balance of kind of what I thought and what the other folks thought. So I appreciated that, and I thought the racial makeup of the board seemed important.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I appreciate the compliments. We'll get you on again, and that's the beauty of the oral boards. It's bringing all different backgrounds of people and different mindsets, and that's the beauty of it. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda was discussion of a request to the law department, or the city manager, I guess, that Walt Chappell had advanced, and I think Paul was, I guess, all right, you may have comments or thoughts on it. I don't know. That's why your name's on the agenda, so.
I have an official motion that I can read.
All right.
And then we can discuss it and see what anybody thinks here. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. In the interest of accountability and transparency, the Wichita Citizens Review Board does hereby request that City Manager Robert Layton provide the board by the week before the October meeting with a full accounting of each legal expense paid by the taxpayers of Wichita to defend one or more Wichita Police Department officer. This report should be in the same Excel file format that I can provide here, is with the itemization of the following facts for each court case, starting with the year 2003 through July 2021, and asking for plaintiff name, first and last name, docket number, and so on. And is that anything that we would be interested in?
Walt Chappell handed this out last meeting, so I think some people have seen it. I assume you've all seen it. I don't know. I had, Walt and I have visited about this as well. This started out as a request to the law department and maybe the city manager, and the law department has prepared a spreadsheet with a lot of the information on it and has given it to him. I understand it's taken a lot of work to get that done. One of the concerns I had is about the scope of the request. This information is probably all available under or maybe a lot of it's available under the Open Records Act and can be requested outside of our context. And so as I was looking at the request, and I told Walt this, I says, you're asking that the department go back to 2003 and include, and actually they have provided a lot of information way back, but it seemed to me that it may not be necessary for our purposes to ask somebody to undertake that work on what I view as a very historical kind of analysis. I'm more interested, from my perspective, on what's going on now as opposed to what's going on 18, 19 years ago. So I don't know that the motion as drafted by Mr. Chappell is necessary for our purpose. But I can see some people thinking that a request for that information on a more current basis might be appropriate. So those were my thoughts, and I've shared.
What is the spreadsheet that you had there? Is that?
It is a spreadsheet that was given to Mr. Chappell by, I think, Jennifer Magana, but certainly from the law department. By the way, this is not police department information, it's law department information, although the financial stuff can be gotten from the finance department, I guess. And it lists case numbers and date the case was filed. It starts out in 2003, and it has some descriptions of who the defendants were and whether or not a claim was paid, and it goes.
So that has pretty much the information that.
Well, there's some holes in it. I think he's got a lot of the information. There were some blanks in it that he wanted filled in, I think.
Well, Jay, before I could act on the motion before us right now, I think I would need to see what has already been provided.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I would like.
Well, and I have a couple of questions. Your motion wasn't real clear to me. Are you asking for just police and law enforcement cases? Or are you asking for what the city has spent, period?
Just
Just law enforcement.
Yeah, spent on.
Secondly, what if are you looking at settlements? Where it didn't go to court, they just settled out of court. Sometimes, as I'm sure Jay knows, those are, you sign something that says you're not going to talk about it.
Right.
And so, but do we want those numbers? It seems to me that it doesn't matter so much who as maybe what and how much.
Well, and how frequently the same officer possibly, right?
So in other words, and I agree with Jay. I don't care what they did 20 years ago. I did a lot of things 20 years ago too. So, but I do care about
pattern for 18 years. If there's been a pattern and this person is still on the force, that could be an issue.
But then, if you want the pattern, then we should look at when the current police chief came. And is there a pattern under his guidance? Because we've had police chiefs, and so, and I think that, you always have to keep in mind that with each police chief, there's policies and politics and all comes into play. So then you need to look at your current police chief. Now that would be, to me, that would be what we're looking at. What are we doing right now? What's our pattern right now? What are our numbers now under our current police chief and our current department?
I would like to see the report that you've got also, Jay.
I thought he passed it out to you.
I didn't.
He gave it.
No, I'm definitely willing to table this, because like you said, if that's there, that's,
Well, why don't we do this? I thought Mr. Chappell gave this to me at the last meeting when he handed out the deal. I can scan it and send it to everybody. The amount paid in a settlement by a governmental entity cannot be confidential.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, so and the amount paid in defense costs is not confidential. Those are all matters of public record under the Open Records Act.
Because it's a public entity.
Because it's a public entity. The issue, as I see it from this, is it's seeking a lot of information and a lot of work, quite frankly, a lot which has been done, for purposes that may not be directly relevant for our mission. And so I raised that question.
And I think it's relevant.
The fact that a lawsuit is filed does not mean someone did something wrong. Now, the facts in a lawsuit may demonstrate someone did something wrong, and the fact that you have a whole bunch of lawsuits may demonstrate you have a risk management problem and you need to address it. But you cannot divine from one individual filing that was a bad event. So it's not necessarily the best data to look at. But anyway.
I think that spreadsheet is probably the same one that I have here on the email.
I assume it is.
But yeah, so I have that. So he's just looking for the stuff that's highlighted, is that?
Well, yeah, I don't have the highlighting of my copy,
Right, but I think that
yeah,
the holes, like you were saying.
He's looking for some information related to.
Is this something that he compiled or something that was sent to him?
I believe the law department prepared it as a result of a request to either the law department or the city manager.
So then do we know why there are holes?
I believe that it's because it took a lot of hours and not all the work, not all.
Okay.
You know.
But it was just a matter of time. There wasn't anything hidden. It was just a matter of time to be able to do it.
I mean, Mr. Chappell told me, I said, well, why isn't this an open records issue? And his concern was that under the Open Records Act, there are some requirements that you have to go through. Maybe you have to pay some of the cost for record retrieval, and he wanted to get the information a different way.
Okay.
And I'm not opposed to, I mean, the information is public. I'm not opposed to that. But I kind of wonder if our board's purpose would say for information that's very remote in time, why that's part of our purpose.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
And what would we do with it?
Well, I'm not sure that.
Once we have it, I mean, might be interesting information, but what would, to go through that much work, my next question would be, we need a purpose.
Right. And I again, our mission is to review cases of police conduct on a current basis, relatively current, and to review the current policies and procedures and all of that. And that's why I'm not a historian in this job. I don't think any of us are, although history does inform where we've been. I mean, I agree to that. But anyway.
This may be a naive question, but Walt brought it up, I think, because of a concern that taxpayer dollars were involved. And unless the city is self-insured, not every dollar that might appear on that report might be taxpayer money, because there might be some settlement costs, attorney fees that are covered by the city's insurance. No?
Oh, I think most of it's paid by city money. I mean, I didn't know it's all public money.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what you'll see, I mean, from the spreadsheet, that there's, back in 2004, there was a claim paid, maybe it was paid in 2006 for a claim that arose in 2004 for over $4 million. That's a lot of money. That's most of what was, a majority of what was paid out, but it was also in 2004. So anyway, it's interesting. But if the board wants to do something, that's fine. I want to table it for further review.
Well, I'm willing to withdraw my motion.
All right.
I'll look more at the spreadsheet more closely and
I'll see that everybody gets a copy of the spreadsheet so that you can all have it, so.
If I can make a comment, because it just occurred to me, is it all right?
Sure.
Okay. It occurred to me, I think, when this came up, it was part of a bigger discussion about the board's ability to only see cases that have been closed. And maybe part of a bigger conversation around, should the board have maybe a little more teeth, or get to the point where they have investigation authority? So does that ring a bell, kind of tying those two together so that you would, be able to be more proactive in some of the things instead of just reactive? And this kind of goes right back to the report that was presented today, where it's less than satisfying, right? Because we don't know where the problems are, who the problem people may be. It's naive to think that there's no bad apples. It's dangerous. I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but uncomfortable to think that the bad players are protected somehow.
All right, first of all of these are the officers involved in the publicly identified. And so that's not a secret at all, because, that any officer who gets sued is publicly identified. So I actually, we're going to go to another point here on a new business, which may address that point. The next item on the agenda is new business. This is not really new business, but if you'll recall, at the last meeting, we had the policy discussion, the discussion paper, and I conveyed to the city manager a recommendation. I had a discussion with the city manager about the recommendation. He would like, and it in fact is now scheduled to meet with us at our next meeting to go over our recommendation that we made and the recommendation that is pending on police discipline, what's public and what's not. And I thought that's a very positive thing, because all of it, at the end result, all of our recommendations just go to the city manager. So at the next meeting, we are going to have a sit down with the city manager to have a good discussion on these confidentiality issues. And so that's going to be a pretty important meeting from the standpoint of our recommendation. One of the things that we may consider, or maybe items of discussion, is how much more information can be provided. And the city manager indicated that, and I'll let him speak for himself on the specifics, but he has indicated that he is open to being more transparent than perhaps the ordinance. They can share more if they choose to share. And so he has indicated that he'd be happy to talk about sharing more in the context, with this board, in the context of cases. So that is going to be an item for next month's agenda. Are there any other items of new business? Okay. Next meeting would be, I believe, October 28th, or 30th.
Jay, last month, that the paper copy of the, I don't even know what to call it, that you had typed up, that we have reviewed here, could you email that out again?
Sure.
For us to review before our October meeting, please?
It's actually attached to the minutes.
It's
attached to the agenda. It's attached to the last agenda. But if you want, I'll email it to you again.
So it's attached to the email that we received last month?
Right.
I can get that.
Okay, if anybody doesn't have it, then let me know. And it should be attached to the minutes when the minutes are posted for this last meeting, too.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just as an advisory, the review of activities and accomplishments There's the final draft, and the final version is here with the updated statistics that weren't available last time I presented it.
Okay.
So I don't know how we entered it into the record and then what we do with it afterwards.
Well, I think that it'll be attached to the minutes, but I also think that we need to have it posted on the internet. We'll get that done. So it'll be on our webpage.
Maybe even a press release or something to, I mean, other people besides that go to the city, I mean, just to notify people to go to the city's website, that kind of thing, to be able to know where to find it.
Yeah, and one other thing then, that's a good point. Kim had raised the issue about, why don't you go ahead and talk about the letters and how we're going to handle the emails?
So we're working on those conclusion letters. They're still going in, presented to staff. So one of the things that we kind of tweaked on the conclusion letters was having the process to where after they come through the conclusion letters and we send it out to them, and if the citizen does not like the finding of it and they would like to appeal it to you guys here at the CRB, we'll give them the process. And the process will have they go to the website for the Wichita Police Department Professional Standards, we'll have a link to where they can click it, and then it'll link to CRB at wichita.gov. And then, because you guys can't access wichita.gov emails, what we'll do is then we'll have that actually just forward to everyone's email. And then it will be up to you guys how it is you process it. I have no idea what that will do to you. I don't know if you'll get everybody wanting to appeal this or not anybody. So, but what we'll do is tomorrow I'll get with Charlie Davison, who is helping me out with this, and we'll send out a test email, and I'll put it on there. This is a test, and please reply, because I really would hate to send to somebody that's not on the board this private information. So if you guys will just respond to me and let me know that it is you. So but that's not, I mean, we're working on it, so, but it's not set up just yet, because we got to change our flyer along with that. So there's still some steps that need to be done.
And so I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And if you want then to review the case, then you just need to respond to Captain Nicholson or to me or whatever and get a separate review. I will, as a matter of public meeting, remind you that we cannot engage in a group discussion by email regarding the substance of something that's supposed to be done. Because we're a public body of some sort. So you can just say, hey, I want to review the case, and that's fine. Then we'll have to review the case in the meeting because we're not supposed to do stuff outside that context.
I guess I wanted to just ask, so as you guys ladies start getting these complaints from citizens who want to appeal our decisions, so you guys will let me know, and then so we can put that stuff together, or will you just let me know at the next CRB?
Well, it depends on what we have for the agenda, but I think any one of us, the way we've done it, can ask that a case be pulled for review.
Okay.
And then we would just tell you that it's been pulled for review, and then we will probably tell the citizen, once we've identified the date, that it's been.
Okay.
We won't necessarily be able to do it at the next meeting because, it may take several months to get that done.
Okay.
But I think, we've told people that we'll review, if somebody has a complaint, we'll look at it. So we'll do it. Anything else?
I had a question for Captain Nicholson. We had some questions from our friend over here. Could we get those answered next time, or I know we have an email. To send them by email, so.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah.